it's Judy Warner. Welcome back to this week's Ecosystem Podcast. Today, I'm joined by Shane Whiteside, President and CEO of Summit Interconnect Technologies. Summit is the largest privately held US PCB manufacturer, so I've asked Shane to join us and give us an outlook for the state of the PCB fabrication industry and the impact that this election season will have on you going into the new year and making sure that you have a resilient and robust supply chain here in the United States. Without further ado, let's jump into our conversation with Shane Whiteside of Summit. Hi, Shane. Thanks so much for joining us today. I'm excited to share you with our design engineering audience today.
All right. Thank you, Judy. Good morning. It's great to be here.
Why don't you introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about your background, and an overview of Summit Interconnect.
Sure. Yeah. My name is Shane Whiteside. I'm currently the president and CEO of Summit Interconnect. We're the largest privately held printed circuit board manufacturer in North America with 8 manufacturing sites in North America. I began my career in the printed circuit board industry, working for a company called Shipley, which made proprietary chemicals for plating and oxides and things like that. So worked in the manufacturing lab for a while, then went out into technical service, did installations of electrical copper lines, and got into sales. And went to work for Shipley's distributed at the time Technica. Got into selling equipment and solder mask, laminates, things of that nature. So kind of learned the full spectrum of the industry from the vendor side, touching all these products and installing all these products at our customers. And at that time, a very quickly growing market in North America. They're talking the early 90s. So there was a lot of growth in North America. We got to the end of the 90s, and North America was, 25% of total world output. And so it was a great time to really learn this industry because of all the growth. So I think just moving forward a couple of years, I went to work for inside the manufacturing operation, a company called Power Circuits, which is now known as TTM Santa Ana. I was there when we founded TTM, and spent several years with TTM. Latest role was Chief Operating Officer there for over 10 years. From TTM, took a bit of a break, did a few things outside the industry, and decided my passion was really printed circuit boards. So 2016, we founded Summit Interconnect, and we've been going for the last 8 years, just growing through organic growth, organic levers, and also through acquisition, acquiring companies along the way. So that brings us to the present.
Well, it's been fun for me to sort of watch you from afar and see that ride. I remember very clearly when you bought the first 2 plants in Orange County, and really the vision that you and your team had for being a really world-class, top-tier PCB supplier. Because at that time, it had really, as you mentioned, really our industry had been decimated because of Asia and geopolitical reasons, but you really needed another strong contender besides TTM in the US to meet the needs of the industry. And you guys came out with guns a-blazing to fill that spot. And it's been really fun to watch what you've been able to do. So, Sean, I thought it would be interesting for our audience, especially given your background and all the aspects you've seen of the PCB industry and how vital it is for our audience of design engineers to talk about the state of the PCB design industry or the PCB manufacturing industry. So why don't you tell us a little bit about sort of where we've been in 2024, post-election, where we're headed into 2025?
Yeah, sure. First, let's kind of reflect back a little bit on the journey that the North American industry has taken. I mentioned, late the end of 1990s, we were 25% of global output. PCB manufacturing in North America was a $10 billion manufacturing industry just in North America by the end of 2000. 24 years later, we're a third of that scale. At the same time, the global market has almost doubled. So we're now about 4% of world output. I think the decline in the market, our market share is expressed in dollar terms, but I would say, if we're a third of the size that we were in 2000 in North America, just in terms of square footage, we're down even more than that because that's the former is measured on a dollar basis. So the number of large factories in North America, so I think of factories that produce more than 500, 600 panels per day. You could probably count them on one hand, if not,
Uh-huh.
maybe need two hands. And that should alarm everyone because we really lost a lot of manufacturing capacity here in North America. I think we've stood up the Printed Circuit Board Association of America about 3.5 years ago. We had 5 founding members when we started the association. We now have over 60 members. What we're really trying to do is sensitize, Capitol Hill, the White House, and the Pentagon to the urgent need to, stabilize and get our industry growing again. So we could talk a little bit more about that. I might have more questions there.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there, Shane, and there's been a lot of sword rattling at the political level, especially over this past year. And from a bipartisan standpoint, it seems like there's been a lot of support to sort of onshore, reshore. But from a pragmatic level, we know that labor costs were never going to be able to compete. Um, exactly. And we'll get into that PCBAA piece in ways that we might engage the US government, and you've certainly been spearheading those efforts. But as we look ahead at 2025, from your position as both CEO, as industry veteran, and from Capitol Hill, what are the challenges and the opportunities you see ahead for the industry?
Well, I think the challenges are to start there, continuing to operate our businesses with, a persistently shrinking global market. IPC statistics uh, tell us that the market's down 7% year to date September. And then last year in 2023, we were down 6% sequentially. So, it's always difficult to manage businesses in a challenging market. But in terms of the opportunities, we think that, growth does lie ahead. It tends to be cyclic in our industry. And I think most insight tells us that 2025 will be a much better year. Just in terms of opportunities that we have where we can work with government, we just will continue the great work we're doing at PCBAA. We introduced legislation now in 2 successive Congresses to provide direct investment funds for the PCB industry and also to provide tax credit for purchases of U.S. produced PCBs. So right now, the immediate opportunity is for us to get involved with Ways and Means Committee in the House right now as they put together the incoming president's first 100 days tax package. There's an opportunity for that tax credit to actually be codified in the first 100 days tax package. So that's what we're doing. I'm flying to Washington, D.C. next week to directly lobby members of Congress that are on that committee to try to get that done.
So, Shane, you work closely with design engineers, but for our audience, I think it's important to talk about maybe what are some of the blind spots or the ways that it could really hurt design engineers if we don't really shore up and strengthen our supply chain here in the US.
Yeah, sure. Well, I think if COVID taught us anything, it pointed out the weaknesses that we have in a globally dispersed supply chain where we're principally relying on foreign manufacturers for our, essential goods and services. I think if COVID is settled down, but if you read the news, keep track of what's going on, there's a lot of geopolitical tension out there right now. And we're in some cases, one conflict away from being even more disrupted. Because at least during COVID, everybody was trying to manufacture and trying to ship. They just had some headwinds. If there's any sort of a conflict out there, that may just come to an abrupt stop altogether. So I think designers need to take that into consideration as they develop their supply chains, and having a good, set of U.S.-based suppliers, in addition to your low-cost region suppliers, should be the objective, I think, for every design engineer.
On another note, Shane, because I am familiar with Summit and many people on your team I have a long history with. And so, what are some of the ways that you're seeing design engineers being challenged today, and how do you as an organization lean into that?
Well, I think the challenge is I don't want to speak for designers because they know better than I do, but increasing pin density, component densities, and things of that nature, and having to pin that out, that drives, geometrical challenges at the board level, from the design workstation, and then as we have to manufacture those at the PCB level in our manufacturing operations. That's a continuing challenge, but also as circuit density increases, feature size decrease, and things of that nature, there can be a trade-off in reliability, lifetime reliability, reliability through assembly operations. So I know our field applications engineers at Summit spend a lot of time with designers, kind of educating them on everything from material selection to also how to good best design practices for not only survival and reliability and assembling, but also for life cycle reliability. So we were an early adopter of what's known as decoupon testing, which is an IPC test method. We have several machines, throughout our manufacturing operations, and we do a tremendous amount of that sort of testing as well. And so we blend that all together where when we interface with the designers, we take all that incredible amount of knowledge that we have in manufacturing, material selection, best practices in design, and we really try to educate our designer customers with that knowledge.
As far as opportunities, let's lean into your point about PCBAA, which is the Printed Circuit Board Association of America. And recently I interviewed the executive director, David Schild, and got some insights there. Um, what inspired you? You're a busy guy. What inspired you to become the chair of this organization when you already have such a full plate?
Yeah. Well, I'm very pleased to be able to, serve as chair. I think we stood up the association about 3.5 years ago with 5 members. Summit was one of the founding members, and Travis Kelly, the CEO of Isola, was our first chair for PCBA. And Travis just did an outstanding job over 3 years, growing our membership from the original 5 to over 60. Getting legislation drafted and introduced in 2 successive Congresses, what's currently known as HR 3249 that I spoke about a little bit earlier.
Mhm.
So, Travis, I guess the opportunity came along for a new chairman to step in. Travis termed out. So they asked me if I would be willing to, serve as chairman of the association. And just coming off 17 years of the IPC board, where I held, as a director of the board for a long time and most recently chairman for 2 years. So I had a little bit of free time to give back to the industry, and that's something that I've tried to do. This has been a very gratifying career, and I'm very passionate about our industry, and I'm always looking for ways to give back. So the timing was good, so stepped into this role earlier this year, and as I said, I'm going to Washington, D.C. next week to lobby with members of Congress and to try to get, our tax provision in the first 100 days tax bill.
Well, let's drill into that a little bit because I just saw some information online, and I think also David and I touched on it. Is that the tax credit part of this bill? Why don't you talk about what that tax credit is, why it's important to, again, our audience, and why this first 100 days and, how that all rolls up together?
Mhm. Sure. So what we're proposing is a 25% tax credit for U.S. produced printed circuit boards purchased by U.S. based companies. So any purchaser of a circuit board, if you purchase it from a U.S. manufacturer, you can get a 25% tax credit, and that's what we've proposed. That's been on the table in 2 successive Congresses in House bills that were put in or that were introduced. And with the current House bill, HR 3249, we have 15 co-sponsors, and it's, both sides of the aisle, Republican, Democrat. So we have a lot of support from very senior members of Congress to get this 25% tax credit implemented into regulation. Right now, though, with the change in administration, a new president coming in and his pledge to, do tax reform within the first 100 days, there's an opportunity for us to take that specific piece out of 3249 and make that part of the overall more comprehensive tax package that's being worked on right now. So there's a lot of urgency because it's, we only have 100 days to do it. So that's why we're all just kind of short notice booking travel to get into Washington, D.C. next week. Did I answer
Well,
your full question there? I think I did.
yep, you did. Well, that 25% would make an incredible difference. Like I said, to level the playing field, that hasn't been level for a long time because we can't compete with particularly labor charges, right,
Yeah,
with Asia and
yeah, there's a lot of reasons that we can't compete. We make great printed circuit boards here in the United States, but and it's not just labor costs. It's the regulatory framework in low cost regions. It's the amount of assistance that companies get from government. Some of it, it's not the kind of assistance you could get in the Western world. But there's a lot of advantages that our competitors in low cost regions have. And so this bill, this 25% tax credit is going to help tilt that scale back a little bit to make it, easier for our customers to, do business with us here in the United States. Just in terms of tilting that balance back a little bit.
well, and I know there's lots of engineers that would, if they could, or their buyers could, they'd rather do business here, even if it were close cost-wise, but it's out of the question otherwise, so I think this is an exciting first step anyways, like you said, it's far more complex than that, but, anyways, it's we haven't had anything like this on the table for quite a while
Hmm.
until, the things that you and the team have done at PCBAA, and again, I came up in the industry. I actually started a little earlier than you, but it's a relatively small industry, and you appreciate that it's difficult, and it's a bunch of great people doing important work. So I, just from a personal standpoint, really appreciate all that you're doing, and I'm a big fan. Um, a kind of off-topic question, but I'm in the middle of doing a podcast series on, the AI design engineering revolution is what I'm calling it, and how AI may affect us. And so while we're talking about, the state of the PCB industry, are there any ways that you think AI or LLMs or machine learning are going to have an impact on the industry over the next year or so?
Yep. I think just in manufacturing operations where we're trying to employ different tools and methods, and some of them are sort of maybe a little bit assisted by AI, but it's really in managing our factories, schedule management with increasing complexity, the increasing number of lamination, drilling, plating cycles, things like that. So that's more of a software and high performance computing kind of driven approach, but
Mhm.
there's some AI that we can leverage at the fringes there. But that's kind of how we're first looking how to deploy it in manufacturing operations. I would think with designers, it would be probably a much more robust, tool to assist them in what they're doing on their workstations. But
Yeah,
for
for sure. It's a software tool, but again, from machine learning or data analytics, there's opportunities. So I was just curious how that impacted, all the plants that you manage and ways that that also might be beneficial to productivity and things you can do. So that's really interesting. Well, Shane, I know you're busy and I've got to let you go, but is there anything else you'd like to share with our audience that I haven't asked you about as you look ahead and what you see coming for the next year?
sure, just again, I'd just like to go back and point to PCBAA and encourage all of your listeners to consider joining. We're up north of 60 members now. So if you design, you procure, you manufacture, or you build upon PCBs, please consider joining our association, because the more companies we have, the more credibility that we have when we go try to do our work on Capitol Hill. If we can get from 60 members to north of 200 members, that speaks volumes, just in terms of our credibility that we have in being a voice of our industry. But no, I think that's it. I really enjoyed the opportunity to talk with you today, and it's good to see you again.
Yeah, it's great to see you again and get an update. Well, I want to echo and also say to our audience that it's important to know that this association, you can be an individual member or your company can be a member, and it's not just PCB manufacturing, right? So OEMs can join, and like anything, you get more districts, more representation of the population. In a democracy, that means a louder voice and more power. So I joined as an individual member, and so I put my money where my mouth is because it is a great industry, and it's one we know that as our audience you use and you need. And I hope you've enjoyed this conversation. Shane, thanks again for joining us today. I hope you or some of your colleagues will come back next year and keep us updated on the state of the PCB industry.
Yes, we'll look forward to that. So thank you, Judy.
Thank you. For our audience, thanks so much for joining us today. I hope you've enjoyed this sort of insider perspective on the state of the PCB industry. We will see you next week. Make sure you go check out the show notes. I'll put links to PCBAA and Summit Interconnect and other things that will be helpful to you. We'll see you next week. Until then, remember to always stay connected to the ecosystem.